Welcome to Melanated Rising, where we inspire, uplift, and ignite Black creatives, all while changing the narratives around Blackness. What does it mean to exist Black in this world today with our many intersections? That's exactly what we explore: the challenges, the beauty, and the brilliance. Every episode is a look at what is possible when Black creatives stand in our undeniable power. Welcome back to another episode of Melanated Rising. This is episode 11. I am your host, Kristen Iris, artist, coach, and speaker. And today, for this solo episode, I am tackling the narrative of having to be twice as good for half as much. Now, if you're familiar with this, and if you're not, let me tell you, it is the idea that as Black people, we have to work twice as hard. We have to be twice as good as our white counterparts to get half as much, the acknowledgement, to get half as much the pay, to get half as much of anything. And I find this to be a really interesting concept because it is something that really does show up in the real world, but it's also something that we end up sometimes internalizing and perpetuating amongst ourselves and individually, like even on yourself. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, but let me give you a couple of examples of where this actually shows up in the real world. So we can look at Serena Williams, and this is a really great example because Serena Williams is arguably the best athlete on this planet right now. And she is constantly being questioned. She is constantly being diminished by sometimes media, sometimes reporters, by the tennis industry. And even when you look at, say, her versus her, they want to talk about this longtime rivalry that really doesn't exist between her and I believe it's Maria Sharapova. And Maria, she can't even hold up to her. Like Serena has beaten her countless times. I mean, it's not countless. I just actually don't know the number. I don't remember the number, but she had beaten her like 10 times in a row or something like that. I don't even remember, but there was this idea of like this rivalry, and it's like, that's not a rivalry. And any other coupling of two athletes, you would never call that a rivalry. They only call it that because Serena is Black, and it's a way of diminishing her accomplishments. So she is excellent. And they will also constantly try to like drug test her for steroids. Maria Sharapova has been like, she was on steroids. She got caught on that. So these are some of the ways where you're seeing the clout and the achievement and the mastery of a Black athlete, of a Black person, a Black woman being constantly questioned or diminished. And that's one of the ways that this shows up. It shows up also in jobs. I mean, I have heard countless people, and if you're listening to this, you might have experienced this, but countless people who feel like they work harder than their coworkers. They get less of the acknowledgement that their coworkers, their white coworkers, can slack off, can do less work, and they get more they get promotions faster, they get more acknowledgement, they get different benefits or bonuses. I want to say not necessarily benefits because that has to do with like the company structure, but bonuses. So these are things that we actually do experience, and it shows up in a lot of different ways. Now, this is a narrative that a lot of times there are Black parents who will teach their kids this. Now, I wasn't actually taught this, and there's some different philosophies when it comes to this. Like, there are people who are like, no, we need to stop teaching our kids that because it's going to set them up to think that they have to do all this extra stuff to be as good. And that's true. But at the same time, I feel like there needs to be an amount of preparation for us navigating, and for our kids navigating, a white dominated and white supremacist world. Like, I did not get that lesson as a kid. No, neither of my parents, nobody taught me that you have to be, that you have to be twice as good to get half as much. But I started to experience that as an adult. I started to experience that in different ways. And in some ways I feel like it would have been nice to be prepared for that. So, I don't really know how to gauge it, and I'm not a parent yet, so I don't want to tell anyone else how to parent. But I think it's kind of an interesting debate that is kind of going around, and talked about amongst Black folks. Now, what I do want to share is one of my experiences and how this kind of showed up in my life. And that is in martial arts and in testing for my black belt. So we're going to enter story time. Now, in 2009, I think it was, my goodness, that feels like such a long time ago. In 2009, that was the first year that I tested for my black belt. And I say that because I had to test twice. Now, the test at that time, and I mean, I haven't seen the test in a while, the sparring test. So the way they did it is there's a curriculum test, which is your skills, your techniques, and knowing everything pretty much from white belt through to black belt, and being tested on it. This it's like an 8-hour test. You don't get lunch. You're there from the start of the day through, I mean, I think our test was actually like 9 hours. It's shifted since then, but at that time it was still like really grueling. So there was the curriculum test, then there was the sparring test, which is at that time and that year was 10 rounds of sparring back to back. And then later on, actually, they flipped it that year. It was 10 rounds of grappling back to back in the morning, and then 10 rounds of sparring in the afternoon, which I don't think, and actually a couple of the black belts had said they thought that was a bad idea because after grappling, the way it wears on your body, everybody looks kind of sloppy when you spar. But anyways, that's beside the point. So it was 10 rounds of grappling, 10 rounds of sparring, back to back, hard sparring, hard grappling. We're not just like this isn't practice. We're not going light. Like we are going hard. And so then there's a component of kind of showmanship that gets done where you have to do a demo and you have to perform that demo at the black belt event. So or the black belt promotion ceremony. So for me, sparring was always really challenging. When I first started martial arts, I remember when I came in and I did my first like introductory lesson to just kind of get the very, very basics so that I wouldn't be lost when I got into class. That, he ran down like the different belts and what you do with the different belts. And immediately I was like, oh, I want to be a black belt, and I knew as he was talking about it, and he's like, this is the level where you start sparring. I was like, oh my God, that's going to be so hard. Like people are going to be punching me and kicking me. I'm going to get hit. And like, it scared me, but I was like, I want to be a black belt. And part of that was because for me to get to black belt, I knew that I would have to overcome that and I would have to overcome that fear. And the whole reason that I started martial arts was because I didn't know how to defend myself. And where I was living at the time, I was living in the Loop, closer towards the South Loop, but really in the Loop because I was going to Columbia College Chicago, and I was living on campus in the. It was a dorm, but it wasn't really a dorm. It was like an apartment building. So I was living down there, and sometimes I was traveling on the train at night. I'm like, oh my God, if somebody attacks me right now, I will not be able to do anything about it, and that really scared me. So I had started. It started because really I was afraid of getting attacked. I was afraid of getting raped and not knowing how to defend myself. Like the idea of not being able to do anything just terrified me. So I knew when I started martial arts, I'm like, I'm going to have to learn how to spar. And some people when I was at the school would say like, oh, well, I'm going to stop once we get to that part because I don't want to spar. And I'm like, that's the part I'm scared of. And that's why I want to keep going because I need to know how to fight. So it was this big hurdle for me. Now, when I went through the test, my goodness, I trained my ass off to the point where I was actually hurting myself. I overtrained, not smart, but I overtrained. I was really pushing myself. I was really doing everything that I could to try and be prepared. It did not help that I got sick the week before, like really bad cold, almost flu-like symptoms sick, to where I went into the test and I was still like coughing up stuff. Like I was coughing up like green stuff. It was really gross. Um, so anyways, I went through the test. Everybody went through the test. I think there were 10 of us at the sparring test. And the sparring test was hella intense. There are a couple of people who were lower belts who were watching, and they were watching and they were trying to keep us in our little zone so that we weren't bumping into each other because we were all sparring at the same time. Okay, so 10 people sparring at the same time is 20 people sparring on the floor. So there were people who were watching and they were like, it looked like insanity. It was just people everywhere punching and kicking, and that's how it was. And so went through the sparring test, went through the curriculum test. The sparring test was where there was questions about me, I'll say, that the black belts were unsure about me. They were unsure about my performance. There were actually like a couple of people, but I was definitely one of the people who was mentioned. Now, when it came to the curriculum test, I killed it. Like I fucking killed it. They were like, she was one of the best ones. Like I was, they said that I was sharp. Like I knew, I mean, pretty much everything that I was supposed to. And the curriculum test was hella grueling too. It was just grueling in a different way. And it's meant to be. It's meant to be mentally grueling as well. So we came through the test, and there was really a big question between me and another candidate who was a white male, older than I was. I was still, I mean, I was in like my early mid 20s, and this person was older, and there was a question between the two of us, and the going line was, we can't fail one and pass the other. We have to either fail both or we have to pass both. And that's not actually what happened. They failed me and they passed him. Now, there were different reasons. They didn't say necessarily the same things about him, but that was like for weeks, guys, for weeks they were saying this. I was hearing the same thing. We can't fail one and pass the other. And there was like this going debate on whether we were going to pass, really everybody, who was going to pass, who was going to fail. They hadn't like told anybody. And so I guess they didn't want to tell anyone until they made a decision about everyone. And we were the two that they were just constantly debating between. So they failed me, they passed him. And for me, it was like really devastating, to be honest, because I had worked so hard. I don't think I had worked as hard for anything in my entire life. I had worked my ass off. And it was like the first kind of like big failure of my life, you know? And I definitely felt a way that I was the only one who was failed. And someone else that they had said the same thing about, like if we fail one, we have to fail the other, that he was passed. Now, the thing about this is, my thing is, okay, if they felt like I wasn't ready or that I didn't hold up, that's fine. I understand that. Okay, then yes, have me retest. However, if you felt the same way about someone else, then we should both be on the same level. We should both be treated the same way. Now, what's interesting about this is, and I was talking to a friend about it who was around at the time. She wasn't testing for black belt. She was a lower ranking belt. And she's one of my very, very, very good friends. And she had pointed this out. She's like, yeah, but nobody on that entire panel, none of the black belts thought that maybe they might have a bias towards him, like a positive bias towards him because he's older and he's white and he's male, just like a lot of them, or that they might have a bias against you because you're younger and you're black and you're a woman and you were defiant. And it's like, these are things to look at because honestly, that was something that was going on is like she's like I was too defiant and also I'm a black woman, but I think there's like a subconscious bias. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions about me being biased around this because I was the one who was failed, let me give you a little bit of history in this school. Now, every year, the black belts, well, every year that there is a black belt test, consistently, the person that they choose to fail, even when it's between, okay, these people are on the same level, we can't pass one and fail the other, the person that always has to retake the test is the black or brown person almost every year. So my year, the first time I tested, the year before I tested, the black person was the one who failed. The year before that, the black person, actually, it wasn't the year before that because I think it was a couple of years that we might have had a break, but like there were two or three other people before that, where the year that they tested, the black person was the one who failed. The year after me, after my first test, my second test, which is the one that I passed, the other person of color, they weren't black, but they were another person of color, they were the one who was failed. And they were also pitted up against a white male who they were like, we can't pass one and fail the other. And they passed one and they failed him. The year after that, they failed the black student. The year after that, they failed the black student. So this is actually a consistent thing that shows up in the school and nobody's questioning it. And it's something that I saw, and even at the time, I kind of wanted to ignore it because I didn't want to think like that about my school because I love that place. It felt like home. It is not a place that I'm part of anymore, but it felt like home to me at that time. It was like my home away from home, and those were my closest friends. We had been through a lot through like training and testing, like that builds serious bonds. So like these are people that I was like, oh, these people are going to be in my life for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to think about the school in that way, even though there were definitely some issues around sexism and just a lot of like really shitty politics. And that honestly was one of them. When you look at the history of the black belt testing, you cannot tell me that the black people are the ones who are lazy or they're not as good because we are the ones, like, we work our asses off. We are some of, like, some of us are like really, really excellent martial artists. And it's not that we were lazy. It's not that we weren't as good. There is a bias in that place. And so for me, this was one of those places that it showed up. You have to work twice as hard to get half as much. I mean, it's not exactly that it doesn't exactly play out like that, but the idea that I have to be better than my white counterparts. I can't just be the regular standard of excellence. I have to be beyond that standard of excellence because when it comes to it, somebody else who is equal to me or on the same level as me or being judged similar to me, if they're white and I'm black, I was the one who was held back. And it happened repeatedly with the black candidates. Okay, now I retested, and that was actually a hard decision to make because I was really like, no, I put my everything into that. Like, if they failed me, if they didn't see if they failed me, then I don't want to go through that again so that I can work my ass off again and they can fail me again. But I decided to retest. I was like, no, I want to do this. I want to be good to the point where to where they can't deny me. Good to the point where I know if they fail me again, that's not about me and it's not about my skill. That's about them. And so I retested. I trained differently. I trained with different people. I mean, a whole year went by, a whole year from one test to the next. So yeah, a lot of things are going to change. And I passed the next year. As far as I know, there wasn't really a question about me, like, because I had asked, and they're like, "Well, no one's really like we think you did good. We're not really debating about you." But again, that same debate, like I said, came up with two other candidates, and it was if we can't pass one and fail the other, and that's exactly what happened. And the one who failed was the person of color. and he tested again a few years later, and he passed. So this is something, like I said, that does actually show up in the real world. It shows up in our lives, and a lot of times the people who are doing it don't even realize they're doing it. Like, there has not been, as far as I know, a conversation within that school about race and about the ways that there may be a bias against people of a certain race. That's not something that's being discussed, and it should be. um, but when it comes to these kinds of narratives, for us people of color, for us Black people in particular, it fucking sucks, because it is actually one of the ways that we are continuously denied. And I'm taking this completely out of the context of my story. Now we're talking about this in general terms. Is when these things happen, we are actually being denied access to opportunity and resources that if we were white, we would have access to, that we, quotes, finger quotes, deserve, because we're putting in the same or more work as white counterparts. So, in to give you an idea of, like, in context, why, what I mean by this is, say a corporate context, okay, a job. The Black person versus the white person. The Black person is working harder. Let's say it's a sales job. They're bringing in more people or more sales, more leads. They're performing better, but the other person is the one who gets the promotion, or they get whatever bonuses, or etc. The Black person who is working harder is actually being denied access to bonuses. They're being denied access to more funds, which means more financial freedom. They're, access to, maybe they're being denied access to opportunities to work with other people or other accounts or things like that. So that's one example of how this shows up in a way, in a system, in the way that this society operates, in a system that actually continuously holds us back. So it does happen in real life. And it may not be that clean cut as twice as good or working twice as hard and you're getting half as much. But it is the idea that we have to work harder. We have to live up to a higher standard. We have to perform to a higher standard to be seen as even equal to our white counterparts who are in the same field or doing the same thing. So there's another side to this. So there is a way that this gets perpetuated on a societal level or in different environments. But there's also a way that we internalize that and perpetuate it, one, amongst ourselves, and then also individually against your individual self. So amongst ourselves is the way we as Black people don't trust each other. So a lot of times we will defer to the white experts, going to the white psychologist, going to the white leaders of an organization, the white whoever that we're looking up to for knowledge on how to do something, instead of looking to the Black excellence that is out there in front of us. Or for example, even in the coaching industry, there are people, and business coaching, whether it's business coaching, life coaching, whatever, there are Black people who will look for white coaches, and if they see a Black coach, will not trust them as much. Maybe not even consciously be aware of it. It may be subconscious, but they will not trust them as much as like the white leaders, and they will be quicker to go to the white coaches, to go to the white educators or whatever, than they will to the Black educators. So same thing with products. Okay, people are more willing to trust the white creators of products than Black creators of products or Black businesses. And that's one, white people do this as well, but amongst ourselves, even within our own community, we do this where we trust white people more than we trust our own people. And that perpetuates the idea that our own people have to live up to a higher standard to prove themselves worthy of our money or our patronage or whatever it is, that we are holding ourselves up to this higher standard and more willing to almost be more like lenient or forgiving when it comes to white people who are doing the same thing. Now, taking that aside, what I really want to get into is the way we internalize it individually and how that shows up is, for example, when you're working really hard on something and you don't want to ask for help, or someone even comes to you and offers help and you say no. Now, the reason this is an internalization of the idea that you have to be twice as good or work twice as hard for half as much is the idea that we're not allowed to accept help. That if you accept help, you're not good enough, or that you're not deserving of the help that you actually need that is going to propel you further, right? So just think about that if you've ever done that, where you're like, I'm not going to accept help, or someone offers help and you're like, no, no. Internally, was there this deep down feeling of, I don't really deserve this help? Or you got help with something and then it accelerated your progress, or it introduced you to the right people, or it took you to the next level, and you're questioning whether you deserve what you've now achieved. Because you're like, well, I got help. Well, this person connected me. Well, I only got this because blah, 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 insert way that is actually diminishing your own accomplishment here. See, ask yourself if you've ever done that. Either rejected help, didn't ask for help, or diminished your own accomplishments because you got help from someone. Now, that's some of the ways that we do it. I had actually spoken to someone who that had happened, where she was questioning. She's like, well, do I really deserve this? I don't even remember what it was. It was like someone had gifted something to her, and she's like, well, do I really deserve this? Because, I only got here because someone helped me out. It's like, yes, you got help because that person saw something in you. They saw something in you that, like, they wanted to support, that they wanted to help flourish. You deserve that. And that's always something that like we question. And part of why we question that is because the world around us, society around us, is constantly telling us that we're not good enough, that we're not deserving as Black people. These are the messages that are constantly perpetuated. So we end up taking that, seeing that in the outside world, and turning that in on ourselves. And that's what happens when you have the internalized oppression. It's not just the oppression of the world around you, making it harder for you to have access to this, or um, making it harder for you to, get the promotion or something like that. It is the ways we turn that in on ourselves. I don't deserve, or I didn't deserve this, or I can't ask for help. Now, those are just some of the ways that you can stop. Actually, when looking at those examples, it's pretty simple. One, accept help when people offer it. If people offer help and you're like, this is actually what I really need, this would really help me, take the help. Take it. They're offering it to you for a reason. They're not giving you a handout. They're not pitying you. They're offering it to you because they see something in you that they want to help nurture and nourish. They see something in you that they want to help lift to the next level. So accept the help. Now, if someone's offering help and you're like, oh, this is actually not what I need, don't accept the help. That's a different story. So the other thing is ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. Now, here's one of the reasons that I think it makes it hard for us to ask for help sometimes is when you ask for help, you're kind of showing that there's something you don't know. You're showing that there's something that you need. And that can be perceived internally. Like, we can take that as showing a weakness. Oh, I'm showing a weakness. I'm showing where I'm falling short. And we internalize that as meaning I'm weak, I'm less, I'm undeserving. And when you need help, it does not say something about you as a person being less. And that's the idea that we might get in our heads. That's the idea that we might end up living into. Asking for help, needing help does not mean that you yourself are any less, that you yourself are weak. It doesn't say anything about you except that you need help with this. Maybe you don't have the knowledge that you need to. Maybe you don't have the network that you need to. Maybe you don't have access to something that you need. And you can call that in, reaching out to different people, and just be honest. Like, hey, I need help with X, Y, and Z. Would you be willing to do that here? Maybe even offering like, here's what I can do for you. But being honest, being honest that you're looking for help with something and offering something that you do have, offering something that you can do as sort of an exchange. And that's something that can be really powerful in moving you forward. I actually have a really good example of this that I'm living out right now. So last summer, and I actually want to talk about this probably more in another episode. Last summer, last year, about a year ago, probably a little earlier than a year ago, maybe a year and a half, I really realized that one of the things I really want to do is I want to have a multimedia company. I want to have a production company that does film, that produces music, that just all different kinds of industries that centers Black and POC voices and creative work. Like I want it to be, like when they talk about I see the table, this is going to be my table and every seat is going to be filled by Black and brown faces. So that was something that I was constantly having in my mind. I want to have film, like it was going to start with film because I love film, but I want to have this company and I want to have a film production company that centers Black voices. And in that I had all these other ideas about I want to have these internships for, young Black and POC creatives to have them come in and really work deep with me on a project and understand and like really not just doing grunt work, not running coffee, but like really getting into the project and being a part of the project, having their creative work show up in the project and really taking lead so that they not only learn about the industry, whichever industry it would be. For me, I would be running the film one, but also how to collaborate, how to work together, and not in this competition way, in this we are creating something, let's make it happen kind of way. So anyways, I had this big vision. I still have this big vision. And I came across a woman named Tressa Azrael Smallwood, who is she is a Black woman film producer and book publisher. And so she has a film production company that she has built from the ground up. And I was like, man, she did what I want to do. She built it from the ground up because while I had this big dream, I had no idea how to get there. I didn't know anything about building a film company, didn't know anything about that. And so I reached out to her. I was like, I really want to learn from her. I want to learn everything about how she did it. I want to learn everything about film production, about how to do it independently. I want to learn from her. So I reached out. I made her a video. I was like, this is what I want to learn from you. I made her a video. I wrote her an email. I sent it to her. And it was all about like, hey, I want to learn everything about film production from you. This is my dream. This is what I want to do. And I told her what I wanted to do. And I was like, I want to learn from you because you are doing it. I'm like, here's a list of my skills. These are things that I can contribute. I will relocate to learn from you. I can do this. I can do this. And I listed everything, guys. I was like, I taught yoga for this many years. I am a Black belt in martial arts. I've done X, Y, and Z. I went to school for film. I have a degree in fiction, like all kinds of things. I've done this many years of sales and customer service, like everything I could think of that could possibly be an asset to her. I put in that email and was like, whatever it is that you want from me, I will do. I just want to work as closely with you as I possibly can so that I can learn how to build this company, how I can build my own company and how I can produce films. And a week went by and I was like, all right, I guess maybe she's not interested. And then the next day after that, she actually called me, the executive producer and CEO of this company called me and was like, hey, I loved what you sent me. I'm really interested. And I was like, holy shit balls. I was like, I couldn't believe it. So it took a couple months to get started, but like, I think that was in May, June. It might've been June, but then in August, we actually like got things set up and I started working for her. I started working for the company. And now at this point, we're in pre-production for a film and I'm going to be on set pretty much all of April, working on this film. So this is an example of where I was like, hey, I need help. I want to learn from you. I want to learn everything that I can from you about how to do this. And I offered, I was like, whatever it is you need, these are all of my skills. If there's something that you need that is not on this list, I will learn it. So I made an offer. I offered to do really, here's all my skills, but I asked for help because I cannot learn how to build a film production company by myself. You can't run a film production company by yourself. You cannot make a film by yourself. It is a collaborative project. It is a collaborative industry and endeavor that involves hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people for a single film. So this is something that you can do. Who has the knowledge that you need? Who has the resources that you need? What can you offer them? And ask for help, or see about setting up a collaboration. If it's someone who's, like Tressa is someone who's way above me, in the industry. She's doing the damn thing. And so I came to her as like, I want to learn from you. Maybe you want to do a collaboration with someone who's got something that where you guys would be assets to each other, and that's someone that's like not necessarily above you. Maybe they're to the side, maybe they're lateral to you, but reach out to them. Say, hey, this is what I'm thinking for a collaboration. Are you interested? Here's how I think we can benefit each other. Or ask for help. These are important ways that we get to elevate ourselves. We cannot do it alone. You cannot do it alone. We have to learn how to reach out and connect with the people that are going to help us, the people who are going to help take us to the next level. And we need to push ourselves to do that. And it can feel uncomfortable to reach out. It felt uncomfortable to send that video, to send that email. Like I read it, I reread it, I reread it, I reread it. I think I had somebody else read it. And then like hitting that send button, I was like, all right. And then I sent it and it's like, I got that lurch in my gut and was like, oh my God, I did it. Oh, holy crap. And then when she called, I was like, oh my God, she called, And so it's even now stepping into it is like this stretch, not stepping into it because I've been working for them for almost 6 months. Yeah, about 6 months. But now like in pre-production and going into production soon, like it is a stretch on my comfort zone, but this is how we take ourselves to the next level. So this idea that you have to already be at a level to be deserving of help or to be deserving of whatever, find ways to get yourself there. You don't have to do it alone. So accept help, ask for help, take risks. Okay? Taking risks stretches your comfort zone. So taking risks is another way that you start to break this idea. This idea that you have to be twice as good for half as much. Take risks. For me, it felt risky to reach out. Sometimes I reach out to people and it feels risky because I'm like, ooh, is this going to come off a certain way? Is it going to come off like I'm looking for a handout or like, something like that? And it's like, just go for it. Take the risk, jump into an endeavor that feels like challenging for you, that feels like, well, I don't know everything, but I'm going to go for it. Taking risks is one of the things that takes you to the next level. And then the other thing that's going to help you to break that internalization of being twice as good for half as much is celebrate your wins. You have to celebrate your wins because we get way too many messages around us telling us how we're not good enough, how we have to do this to be better, how we're not deserving, how we're not worthy. So you have to be the one to celebrate your wins. And honestly, sometimes the people around you aren't going to be there to celebrate. Sometimes they're not ready to celebrate your wins with you. But you have to celebrate your own wins. And I don't just mean the big ones like, woo, I am on the production team. I am a key part of the production team for this film. Yes, I get to celebrate that. I also got to celebrate that I hit send on that email. That was a win. Taking that risk, that was a win. I got to celebrate when she called me and left a message on my voicemail. I get to celebrate when I honestly relaunching this podcast was something that I got to celebrate. I was like, yes, I love doing this show. I'm shifting the way that I'm doing it. I'm putting it back out there. And I did it. And it felt like, am I ready to do all this work again? I mean, I had shifted it so that I could So that the work was definitely more manageable. But there was a little bit of like, am I doing it too early? Am I jumping the gun? I'm like, no, I love doing this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go for it. Boom. And I got to celebrate that. So celebrate your wins, because your wins are actually the things that remind you that you're doing good. They remind you of what you've accomplished. They remind you of each of the steps that you've taken. When we're so busy doing it, when we're so busy trying to reach the next level, which is good, we have to work, we have to push ourselves. But if that's all you're ever doing and you're never stopping to look at how far you've come, you're never realizing how far you've come. And that looking back and that celebrating gives you a boost of confidence. It's a big boost. All right. And every little one, when you get in that habit, you start to really see and immerse yourself in your own awesomeness. And that's not a bad thing. Some people might be like, "Oh, but that's not being humble." You don't have to be humble with yourself. You can celebrate yourself. And I actually don't think that celebrating yourself is not being humble. I think it's being honest with yourself. And it's also really good for your mental state and your mental wellness to be like, I did really awesome today. Or, wow, I took that step. That's so awesome. Let me celebrate myself, and doing little things for yourself, even not just like acknowledging it, but maybe even doing little things to celebrate. It generates a cycle of positivity. And that cycle of positivity gives you more confidence and it puts you in a better mental state to keep going and to keep taking more risks, going to the next level, reaching out to different people. All of these things are going to continue to elevate you. And that's, of course, you guys know that's what I'm all about, the rising of the melanated. And this is the ways that we do it. On the subject of celebration, guys, celebrate your friends. Celebrate your friends' wins, even if you're like, I don't get it. Why is this podcast a big deal? Or why is this thing a big deal? If your friends come to you and they're like, oh my God, I did this and I feel so good about it. And you're like, I totally don't get that. Celebrate it because your friend feels good. This is an accomplishment to them. You don't have to get it. Celebrate them. And in that way, we also help to elevate each other. We also help each other to rise. So while this is a narrative that is often true, the being twice as good for half as much, while this is a narrative that it often shows up in our external lives. We often perpetuate it amongst each other on that subject. Also, check your judgments of other Black people and Black businesses and Black leaders. Like, are you holding them to a higher standard? Are you untrusting of them? Because if you are, and you got to be really honest about that, you got to start checking yourself. We are not going to excel unless we are checking our own internalized oppressions, our internalized white supremacy, and how we not only perpetuate that against our individual selves, but against our collective Black community, global Black community. So check yourself. Am I holding Black people, Black businesses to a different standard? Am I more forgiving of white people? Am I seeking out white expertise? Check yourself on that. Because that's also a way that we perpetuate. And when you check yourself and you start looking at, maybe I am doing that. Why? Why am I doing that? Where did this story come from that this is the bar, or this is the expert, or that I can't trust these people? Where did that come from? Because when you start looking at that, you can dismantle it. You can't dismantle what you don't look at. So you got to look at it for how you relate to other Black people. You got to look at it for how you relate to yourself. Have I internalized this? Am I denying myself things because I think I don't deserve it? Am I not asking for help when I really need it because the world has told me that if I don't do it on my own, I'm not good enough? Look at these things, because we get to work together. We get to work also individually, solo endeavors, but we need to start breaking this narrative, because the more and more we continue to perpetuate amongst ourselves or internalize it amongst ourselves, the more we're actually really holding ourselves back. And I'm all about the rising. I'm all about us rising. So look around at your life and see if there are ways that you are living into this that you don't actually have to. Ways where it's not your environment or society perpetuating it on you, but ways that you're doing it yourself. And, look at those 3, kind of 4 steps that I gave you: accepting help, asking for help, taking risks, and celebrating your wins. These are all things that are going to help to break that for you if you are. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you subscribe so you get new episodes, and please leave an honest review on iTunes. It is the best way to help others find us and get the show out to more ears. If you would like to support this podcast, if you like what I'm doing, you're picking up what I'm putting down, I invite you to join my Patreon page at patreon.com/melanatedrising. You can go there and join. I have different tiers, and that is a way that you can support the show. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Melanated Rising. Always remember to stand in your Black creative power.